Hello. One question has perplexed philosophers for centuries. Socrates, Aristotle, Descartes all postulated on this same question during their respective era. The question being, what is the beginning and what the beginning means? Scientists like Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, and Charles Lyell have taken this a step further, questioning and theorizing over the origin of the beginning, predominantly the origin of life. Evolution is one of the biggest theories behind the origin of life. And as an undergraduate research student in the microbiology department, much of my time outside research is learning the intricacies of organisms that which stems from the theories under evolution. One such theory, the endosymbiotic theory, helps to guide and explain what the origin of organelles are inside living cells. In addition, the origin of the mitochondria and the chloroplast inside those cells. To understand this theory, we first need to dive into the history of the theory. Then we'll discuss the microbiology of mitochondria and chloroplast and how that relates to the evolution of those entities by the theory. And finally, we'll discuss the criticisms surrounding the theory. Firstly, a century and a half earlier, in 1859, is when Charles Darwin produced his first known text of evolution, creating the interest in origin and natural selection. In 1905 is when a botanist named Konstantin Merkovnikovsky proposed that organelles were independent at some point in the evolutionary track. Concurrently, a scientist by the name of Lynn Margulis developed a parallel theory in 1967 on the origin of organelles, saying that it was from a concept called endosymbiosis. To help you understand endosymbiosis, we need to explore the microbiology of the organelles in the cell to first capture the evolution of those entities as explained by Margulis. Firstly, the mitochondria, also known as the powerhouse of the cell, produces ATP, which is necessary for cellular function. Other cells, such as plant cells, use a different organelle to produce their energy called the chloroplast, both of which function similarly in the respective cell type. Knowing these key concepts, the endosymbiotic theory states that these microbes, pre-engulfment mitochondria and chloroplasts, were once independent prokaryotes and were engulfed in a host cell based on a symbiotic relationship. And I know that's a lot, but that, as you can see on the slide, a larger prokaryote ate the other prokaryotes, and which in this context was the mitochondria getting eaten by a host cell, and it was beneficial. That's why it remained in the host cell. The phenomenon occurred back with the first known cells that were conjugated around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. And these ancient prokaryotes were the first photosynthesizers, which means that these turned gaseous carbon dioxide into food and energy for these living organisms. The mitochondria and the chloroplast were among the first original aerobic or oxygen-breathing cells to use oxygen to create nutrients for themselves. After some larger cells engulfed them and symbiotically invaginated these aerobic prokaryotes, they were selected for natural selection since they were able to digest oxygen at an efficient rate. In an article written in 2022 on Libra Biology, it discusses the Lynn Margulis' evidence for this theory, which states that present-day mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own circular DNA, and they have their own ribosomes at a size of 30S to 50F subunits, which is closer to self-sustaining organisms than non-self-sustaining organelles. And the primitive eukaryotic microbes do not have mitochondria, but have nuclear membranes. And this is specifically brought up in an article written in 2015 on the Royal Society Journal, in which it says that the mitochondria were independent enough to have been able to live by themselves and were not an occurrence of membrane folding, which is the evolutionary creation of the other organelles inside the cell. These evidences and the theory do not come without some scrutiny. More specifically, in an article written in 2012 titled On the Origin of Mitochondria and Reasons for Skepticism in the Endosymbiotic Story, the author claims that the energy demands for this phenomenon to occur would not be able to hold up by the mitochondrial mechanisms or processes of that day and that climate billions of years ago. It needs a greater amount of energy or a stronger symbiotic demand to evolutionary shape life as we know it. Another journal article written in 2012 on the micro reviews in cell and molecular biology shows that there is still a lot of key information that is undermined and undetermined in this theory, like how glycolysis came to be or why there is any intermediate species, which intermediate species are species that can show fossil evolutionary trees. These questions only raise doubts, and doubts is what undermines these theories. In conclusion, this theory is still a practical theory in microbiology, even with some doubts. It has a short history and has a lot more research that needs to be addressed to be able to put together the 4 billion years of progression to find its way as a credible, undeniable theory. Lastly, it is important to know that this is a progressive theory, which means it is ever growing, and the disbelief on its own end only strengthens the desire for researchers like myself to investigate this phenomenon more. Thank you.